Hello, friend, and welcome to the U-Turn podcast. This is the absolute place for you if you are ready to create a business, a career, a personal brand, or just a life that you are so proud of. And every single week, I'll be bringing you PhDs, subject matter experts, psychology practitioners, business leaders, all onto the show to elevate your success in your work and also your life, so that you can leave a legacy, you can amplify your authority, and you can really skyrocket the amount of opportunities that you are creating for yourself in your career, whether you're in corporate or you're a business owner. My name is Ashley Stahl. I'm an international best-selling author of the book U-Turn: Get Unstuck, Discover Your Direction, and Design Your Dream Career. And most importantly, I'm the CEO of Wise Whisper Agency. I'm a top 100 TEDx speaker on the internet, and it inspired me to start Wise Whisper because my company now has a completely done-for-you process to get your signature talk written and booked on stage. In fact, we've written more than 100 TEDx talks, and we've placed more than 100 clients on stage as speakers for TEDx events. And now I'm on a mission to help every change maker that I know impact millions and share their story. So right now, I'm excited to bring you right into this week's episode. All right, U-Turn friends, I feel like how many times have you heard me say I have a good friend coming on the show? And everybody's my friend, but this is like really my good friend. So today I want to bring Niyc Pidgeon on the show. If you haven't heard of her, I'm so excited you get to be here. She is not only just a queen in business, helping so many people, mentoring so many people in really taking their businesses to the next level. I really think of Niyc as somebody who understands online funnels, understands marketing, and helps so many people take their businesses from bland to grand. And also,
Ooh, yes.
I just made that up. And
I'll
then
take it.
And then also Niyc, she has a book coming out called One More Day. And today, it's September 10th that we're recording this, is Suicide Prevention Day. So it's a special day. Niyc has a story where she's lost a lot of very close people to her through suicide. And she's a positive psychologist who writes about it. And this is definitely not her first book, but I would argue to say this is her most important one.
Mm.
So without further ado, Niyc, I love you. Thank you for coming to be with us.
I love you. I'm not going to argue with you on that this is the most important book. I'm totally here for it as well. And I just feel like it's the most important work that I can do for the world right now.
Can you start with telling everybody, like, why is suicide a topic that matters to you? I know you have some like really pointed stories of how suicide has shown up in your life. I'm even curious where it began. Like, was it your friend Sophie, or did it happen before that? Can you just take us all on that journey with you?
I mean, it matters to me, but it should matter to everyone. Like 77% of entrepreneurs struggle with their mental health and 81% do nothing about it. So this conversation about suicide prevention, it might sound dark, but it's actually the most happiest, joy-filled, hope-filled thing I've ever talked about, because it's the most preventable cause of death that there is. And I lost 3 of my close friends who died by suicide. Most recently, Sophie. So she was Miss Great Britain. She was a Love Island reality TV star. Like, I'm smiling talking about it. It's just, she's amazing. She was amazing. And before that, when I was 11 years old, had my own childhood suicide attempt. So that's where my journey started with mental health. And I didn't actually close the loop or realize it took me to write this book to kind of cast my mind back to realize just how much of a closing of the loop it's been to do this work. Because whilst that happened in my childhood, I never really thought about it, never really brought it into my day-to-day life. And it just feels like I've had all of these opportunities to be presented with processing grief or looking at what it is that helps us to truly live and build lives that are worth living, because of these tragedies that I've experienced, that I can now kind of transform to take out to help other people.
Yeah. Take us into that moment that you were cheersing with Soph after a funeral of a friend. Like, how old were you? What was happening at the time? And what do you think happened for your friend that made her pivot into taking her own life?
I mean, it's such a crazy story, isn't it? And the fact that you remember it just shows like how poignant the story is.
Yeah.
So I I was invited to speak my friend's obituary back in Newcastle in my hometown, and I just literally got off the doing that talk, and Sophie and I had walked out of the funeral and we'd got into my car and we'd gone to like the wake thing, and we're talking together, and she'd said to me, she was crying her eyes out, and she was like, Nick, like, this cannot happen to any of our other friends. Like, let's make a pact and a promise right now that this won't happen to anyone else. And that was back in 2014. 3 years later, our friend Sarah died by suicide. And then a year after that, Sophie took her own life as well. And it's really wild because there's a video of her online with one of the other Love Island contestants talking about online bullying and
Mm-hmm.
saying how bad it is and how important it is that we're actually having conversations to support each other and get rid of online trolling. And she said in that interview, this is the reason that so many people are taking their own lives. And I know that that's one of the things that she suffered with. It's like you have all of the fame and the celebrity, but there's also a dark side that comes with that. And you don't even have to be a celebrity. Like kids, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Online bullying and what social media. There was it basically the suicide rates in young people tripled
Oh,
with the
wow.
invention of Instagram.
Wow. It's interesting because in life, I think we set goals, we want certain things. Um, but we don't really think about what it's going to come with, right? Like, um, maybe it's financial, like you want this thing, but it's going to cause you a lot of stress. Maybe it's emotional, like you want this resource, but it's going to come with having to face so many emotional pains.
Mm.
It's like every gain sometimes will be accompanied by some sort of loss. And sometimes when we set goals, we just think about the gains. We don't think about what comes with it. Or we want change in our life and we don't realize that maybe we're fixing one problem, but with a new solution might come other things or might come grief. And so I think to live is to grieve, and people don't really think about, you talk about online bullying. We live in a time where so many artists don't feel safe to go online and share. I think that there's a lot of really beautiful evolution, like, it came like gender pronouns or Black Lives Matter, a lot of movements that we've seen that are almost like it's been overdue, right, for these movements. But then at the same time, there's been this hypervigilance in the air of people that don't want to misstep. They don't want to be seen in front of somebody trying to learn or how to communicate correctly or be corrected. And so many people feel small and scared to just be in this world that we live in. What are some ways that you recommend maybe noticing when your mind is going down the path? Because I imagine for a lot of people, there's a spectrum of suicidal ideation, right? Like I have gone into like existential thoughts where I'm like, what's the point of even being here? Like, but I've never gotten to a place of being like, so now I'm going to take these steps to take my own life. And I think a lot of people have gotten to that. And I almost wonder if that's totally normal to have these existential thoughts. So how do you start to notice when the world is starting to actually get to your mental health?
Yeah, I think it's more common than we would like to think. And that's what's been really beautiful about writing this book and having these conversations is you realize that it's touched so many people. And whilst we don't want these tragedies and traumas to be occurring in the world, because it is preventable, it's also real life. And you realize what's personal is universal. And one of my favorite things is like talking to so many men and men opening up and saying like, I felt like this as well. I'm like, whoa, I have no idea that you felt like that.
Right.
And I think it's very connecting through that vulnerability. At the same time, I've spoken with some people who don't understand mental health, never mind understanding suicidal ideation. So I have some friends that are like, Nick, I just don't understand. Like this thing that you've built a career in, I don't get it because I never feel bad. I don't have mental health issues. And most people that I speak with have had some sort of challenge where they've gone through something, they've found it hard to get through a day, or they've had a hard week, or they've had a hard month. And the idea or the concept of positive psychology, it's not about being positive all of the time. It's about building coping strategies and helping yourself be stronger and more resilient so that if and when hard times do come around, you're able to actually create shifts within yourself and you feel more capable. You know that, yes, you might experience passive suicide. So passive suicide is the nihilistic thinking, or it's, well, it would be better if I just wasn't here. Or one of my friends who's a huge DJ, he's spoken out publicly about the fact that when he was traveling and doing all of these huge gigs, huge celebrity, like so many fans, it was so lonely at the same time. And he was so exhausted and so tired that he would think about just driving his car into a wall. Now that's like passive suicide, where you're not actively making a plan, and you can notice that you're perhaps going down a I call it a downward spiral. And like, you can energize the upward spiral, you can energize the downward spiral. The downward spiral can be as simple as you're noticing that you're thinking more negatively more of the time. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic, like, oh my God, my life is over. It can literally be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why is nothing working in my life? And you'll start to notice more of a frequency of those thoughts. Those thoughts are stronger than positive thoughts. So whilst we don't want toxic positivity, you don't have to be happy all of the time.
Yeah.
The negative thought takes 3 positives to outweigh it. So when you know that, it's worth investing in your mental health.
It's interesting you say that, because it feels like we're always like wanting to win at something, but we don't realize, like, well, why is it that loss is so much more painful, or like, than winning is happy? It's like, when we win, we just want something and it feels good to get something. But when we lose, we're facing grief and pain and all these different things. There's such different experiences. One thing, I don't know why this comes up, but those of you listening, I invited Niyc to a concert with me last week. She couldn't make it. I didn't mention this to you, Niyc, but I was thinking at the concert, it was interesting. I was front row because I went on my own. And so it's kind of easy to, like, it was at the Roxy in West Hollywood. So it was easy for me to like sneak my way to the front of the stage. It was my favorite band, Tycho. I noticed the lead singer would close his eyes whenever I got eye contact with him, or whenever the audience did. And it got me really thinking. I'm like, wow, he has to play to so many audiences. And obviously I'm a fan, but not like in a creepy way. At least I hope, hopefully I'm not, like, if I don't say so myself.
I don't believe it.
I really love Tycho, but like,
when you think about businesses growing their sales beyond forecasts, you probably think about a product with very high demand, a very focused brand, and influence-driven marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Shopify is home to the #1 checkout on the planet, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout brands like Mattel and Heinz use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/U-turn, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/U-turn to upgrade your selling today. Again, that's shopify.com/U-turn.
I was at the front just watching these people because I just think their music is amazing. And I was really noticing how much he would close his eyes and take in the music. And I was tuning into like how overstimulating it must be for him to stare at so many eyeballs and people. And he's really probably, and this is all a story, I have no idea what this guy's truth is, right? But my story was, he's in this for the music. And so, you know, people enjoying his music is a way to be met by the universe. But I could see my perception was his overstimulation by all these people and needing to just close his eyes and go inward and take in his own concert and music. And I related to that. Like, I was thinking about when I used to go on speaking tours, and I really struggled after the talk to talk to everybody because it was so much energy going out and so much on my nervous system to be seen. And even if I did a great job and people were inspired or not, whatever it was, it felt like it was more than my body could take to start connecting afterwards, after coming down from something like that. I know a lot of our friends, Nick, you being one of them, you guys seem to like very gracefully be able to like get on stage and then walk off and connect with people. Maybe I'm more of an introvert, which is very unbecoming. Like, it's not a vibe, right? You get on a thing, you inspire people, and then you run away. But I feel like everybody has their limits of what we can do in the world to take care of our energy. And sometimes the world demands you to go past your limits. You know, I think about my neighbor, who is like one of the, I mean, her literal name is Ursula, like in the Little Mermaid. But I think about how she's always confronting me about Jupiter, my dog, and how she's always upset at me because she doesn't like Jupiter, or she, you know, whatever. It's like we're always dealing with these stressors that can feel sometimes beyond what we're capable of dealing with. How do you set boundaries? How do you recommend people listen, start taking care of themselves so that they protect themselves before they get into a really dark headspace?
It's a great question, and the answer is going to be different for all of us, because mental health it's a complex problem which has many simple solutions, but it's not one solution. So it's not a one size fits all approach. And I actually love to do this thing called tiny tools. And I have a list of tools in the notes section of my phone because I'm such a basic bitch. I have to have things be as easy as possible. Otherwise, I'll either forget them or I just won't do them. So I used to be the girl that wanted everything structured, and you have to do it this way in this order, and it has to be hard in order for it to work. It doesn't. Like, you get to experience mental health as an adventure. I don't even say journey. I'm like, it's a mental health adventure. And when you approach it like that, you get to select from this menu of tiny tools and choose the things that feel good for you. My invitation is that you try all of the tools and interventions and exercises at least once, and you see how they feel. And then you get to choose like your go-to toolkit. And I say choose 3 things that really work for you. And it might be reaching out to a friend and just offloading some of your emotion in a safe space, or having a real conversation where you can be honest. It might be looking at something like connecting with higher purpose, higher power, God in a spiritual practice. It might look like you deciding to put on your favorite music, or like you going to the concert and deciding this is something that I want to do for myself.
Yeah.
If I saw that person on stage, I'd be like, he's maybe having a really profoundly grateful moment where he's like, I can't believe that I created this for my life, and I am so grateful. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to anchor in this feeling in my body. I'm going to feel all of the feels. So it's also remembering that, like, we all have our own perspectives and judgments, and that's exactly one situation that 2 people or 3 people have experienced in a different way. So everyone has their own map of the world. We don't need to necessarily concern ourselves with appeasing everyone else or catering to everyone else all of the time. If we all took the stance that we're going to look after our own self first, and this is one of the things I teach in the book, it's that you have to resource yourself. You have to make sure that Ashley is strong today, because then you're going to show up and you're going to give to your clients. You're going to show up as an amazing person in your relationship. You can't do that if you're not feeling your best. So you do have to give yourself permission to rest, give yourself permission to relax, give yourself permission to do the thing that feels right for you. I also just want to speak to the specific example that you gave of coming off stage and feeling like it's too much energy. I think that that is a personal system that each of us gets to decide how we want to roll in our lives and our businesses. You might have a security team come and whisk you off stage so that you can get into peace, so that you can show up and be better when you're on the actual stage.
Yeah.
I had an experience where I was in the audience with someone who was launching a book, and they didn't make eye contact. And I had a big judgment around that for a long time, because my judgment was that that person was being rude because they weren't making eye contact with the people that had traveled so far to be there with them. But in actual fact, what I learned later was that that person was going through mental health challenges, And it was actually my judgment and lack of compassion in that moment that I got to repattern. So I think it's remembering that there's always a lesson in all of it. And whether it's a dense emotion like grief or a dense emotion that's a challenge, we've got the opportunity to transmute that through looking for the lessons and the blessings within it, rather than just trying to push it away.
The lessons and the blessings.
In a Geordie accent.
I know, that's me trying. I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm just thinking like we're all so different, and yet this is a world that it is so hard to be here sometimes. It's so hard to make the money you need to make, to support the things that you need to have, to provide to kids if you have kids, to make time for yourself, to take care of your mental health. And I just want to say, like, one of the biggest awarenesses I've had in recent months, ever since I came back to LA, I've been building my company and I have less time, and it's really unusual for me to be this taxed. And I realized that I have some friends, not in my close circle, but around me. And I've talked to you about this, Nick, where their mental health requires some things of me as their friend that felt too burdensome for me to do. And it's not that they're a burden, it's just for me, with where my capacity is, I can't show up and give to them in the way that they have special requirements. I think of a friend who has driving anxiety. She requires that I drive to her. I'm just not in a season for the next at least 12 months that I can do that. So I'm also aware that while we do need to have compassion for everybody's mental health, I don't know who needs to hear this, but it's also not your job to navigate someone else's mental health. It's not your job to do personal development for yourself and for someone else. You just need to take care of yourself. And I think sometimes that can create a whole slew of different overwhelm and feelings when somebody's over functioning and trying to regulate the whole room, of people and make everybody else happy. What are some things in people's personalities that you think makes them skew towards becoming someone who may have more suicidal ideation, or may skew that way, versus someone who wouldn't?
I mean, how long have you got?
Yeah.
Because there's many different answers to that. And I think we've got to remember that when you do for yourself first, you're actually also helping other people. Like, we take the example of the concert again. Like, I really had to look after myself that week. I was running the marathon, and I love hanging out together.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I'm going to come. I'm like, actually, no, I'm not going to come. And I know through our relationship, you're going to celebrate me, and you did celebrate me for looking after myself, and vice versa. So it's like, how can we build a world where we have more of an understanding of allowing each other to take the time or take the tools that they need in order to feel better, and not be mad about that? I know that it has been so hard to be a person that has a public profile as a positive psychologist on the days where I haven't been feeling very positive at all. And I think that the biggest mistake that I made in my early years in this career was to think that I had to show up and put on this front, because that in itself was completely exhausting, and it made me feel way worse. So I think that you could have, like, if you've got mental health conditions in your family, then maybe you would experience more suicidal ideation. If you have been under intense pressure, or you've had traumatic events, the traditional example is post-traumatic stress happens when people come out of the military. And yes, there's a huge, I mean, even in law enforcement, 54% more likely to die by suicide. Now, it's not limited to the military or law enforcement. It happens to and for everyone. So I really want people to release this idea that there's a particular person or identity that is affected by mental health challenges. Because often, if I look at my 3 friends that died by suicide, they were the happiest people. They were the life and soul of the party, and you hear it so many times. But they seemed so happy. They seemed like they had it all figured out. And it's like, actually, it's just so complex that you can't tell who is suffering. And sometimes you need to remember to check on your strong friends as well as the friends that you already know are having challenges. Because sometimes the people that put on the brave face and just try and get on with it are the people that need the support the most.
That's so good. Okay. So I know that I was just reading some statistics before we popped on. I was seeing that suicide right now, it's named the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. I'm sure that number moves all the time. And that in 2022, there were 1.6 million suicide attempts. That means just about every 5 of 1,000 people we come across have attempted. What do you do if you have a friend who you're worried about and you actually think they're genuinely considering doing something like that? Because I don't know. I think about when I was living in New York, there was a girl named Chesley Christ. I don't know if you remember that one, Nick. She was Miss New York, like
Oh,
maybe
yes.
5 years ago. Yeah. She was friends with all my girlfriends, and everybody just thought she was the sweetest, like the sweetest. And she was I think it was E! News reporter or Bravo, like one of those. And she just, the guy that I was dating at the time, he lived on, 42nd Street, like right by Times Square. And she lived one building over. She just jumped out of her building. Nobody had a warning. Nobody thought it would happen. And she was gone. And when we looked into it, she didn't share with just about anybody that she was going through that. And so in a sense, it's like she was a perfectly hidden depression. So do you know any research on like how often do these sorts of circumstances, do people even share that that's where they're at? And what do we do if
Yeah.
they...
I mean, even if you look at, I think entrepreneurs, I know you've got so many entrepreneurs in your community, and the same for me, like 81% of people who are struggling never say anything about it. They never seek help. They completely hide it. And the actual theme for World Suicide Prevention Month and Day and Week for this year is changing the narrative. So I think that we have this opportunity to change the narrative away from this thing that is taboo and it's suicide and it's bad and it's dark and it's selfish, to actually be in this message of hope and it's preventable. And yes, it's actually the second leading cause of death in young people, which is so alarming. And it's moving away from these type of statistics and moving towards a vision where I love to say, like, remember when we used to go on planes? Like, I was born in 1987, so I was going on airplanes in the 90s. In the UK, you could still smoke on airplanes. And I just think like that is the most outrageous thing that I've ever heard. Like, you cannot imagine getting on a plane now and people just having a cigarette. I want the feeling and the energy around the outrage and just how ridiculous that is to be what we're saying about suicide in the future. Be like, remember when people used to do that? Oh my goodness, like that is so ridiculous. And navigating it from a place and space of, we don't have the full solution right now, but we can make a start. So I think it's remembering that it's not an absolute, we're going to eradicate this thing right now. But it's like gently, gently, we walk the path together. And the more conversations we have, the more comfortable we can feel sharing with each other. I know that when I have had, because I have had suicidal thinking maybe another 3 or 4 times in my adult life, it hasn't been from a place of I've been really, really depressed or diagnosed with depression, but it's been through maybe I've had a really bad health challenge that stopped me from sleeping. And that has got me to a point where I cannot handle this anymore. And what we know about suicidal thinking is that it's temporary and it moves through and it leaves within, it might be a few seconds or a few minutes. So if you can just hold on and you can keep going one more moment, one more minute, one more day, then you can actually get through this thing and build a life that's really worth living. And that's the thing that I hear people say all of the time, like, oh, I almost did it. And then I realized that I would never do it.
I know that a lot of suicide attempts have been by men, particularly white men, seem to be leading the statistics. Is there any reason that you think that's the case? I totally fine if you don't. I'm curious because I find that to be so odd. Like, I think I read that almost 70% of suicide deaths in 2022 were white men. I know that to me, when I feel down, and I'm not the right archetype to say this, because I don't think I've really sat in suicidal ideation, but the times that I felt like existential and like, what's the point of all this? It's been when I'm so stressed. I feel like I can't keep up with life. I feel like there's so much pressure on me to make life happen. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. I also noticed that the majority of the deaths in 2022 were from firearms. So I'm guessing that means a gun. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So if someone is struggling, I think you asked before, like, what do you do if you think that someone's struggling? You have to ask them. So we're getting away from this apathy or like, we don't want to offend anyone. You've got to ask them directly. Are you actually thinking about taking your own life? Have you made a plan? Tell me about that. Tell me more, and get into a conversation. You've got the 988 text service and helpline that you can call, or you can reach out to if you want
Just
support,
988.
advice. 988, yep, super easy. If you want support, a conversation, if you're in crisis, if a loved one's in crisis, also 911 and 999 in the UK if there is an emergency. There's so many populations that are affected. I mean, there's even a statistic. There was an article in Time magazine that wrote about young girls and young white girls. So young Hispanic girls are 30% more likely to die by suicide. Young Black girls are almost twice as likely to die by suicide. And the thing about firearms, it's like, does someone have access to lethal means? So if you're starting these conversations and you're finding out that someone is at risk, or they're suffering, or they're thinking about taking their own life, then getting rid of the lethal means, the access to the firearm, is a first step that you can also take, making sure that it's not easy for them to carry out a plan. Now, my work isn't actually in crisis prevention. I team up with AFSP, which is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They are amazing, and they're doing so much work. They've got like Justin Timberlake is a stand for suicide prevention. Papa Roach, Carrie Underwood, they just did a song together. JT's doing a concert. So it's like people are talking about this, they're a stand for it, and they are I just love the work that they're doing to raise awareness and help people in crisis. The work that I do is preventative. So it's looking at movement, it's looking at meditation, it's looking at conversation, connection, building hope and optimism, devoting yourself to yourself. And through those steps, how can we actually combine forces with the Samaritans, with AFSP, with the crisis intervention organizations, so that we've now got a fuller picture. And it's not just wait until it gets really bad and then we'll intervene. It's actually, no, like, let's do something now, today, in these next few moments together to help each other. And it's going to be way more enjoyable along the way.
It's like, okay, this is the second or third leading cause of death, depending on the stats at any time, for people who are 15 to 29 years old, if not younger. I know there's one death every 10, 11 minutes by suicide. When you think about these things you were sharing, like movement, meditation, sometimes it feels like freaking piss in the wind. For when you talk about something this big, you're like, how the f- are you going to move your way out of these deep of thoughts? So can you talk a little bit about, let's say somebody right now, they're listening and they're like, I don't think I would attempt, but I just need something to get me out of this mindset. So you talked about movement, meditation. Can you share a little bit about what are those low-hanging fruits that really make a world of difference? And I know I'm like double questioning you, but the other piece of like, how do you ask people how they're doing? Because I imagine if I was thinking about committing suicide, I don't know if I would tell people if I really was thinking about it.
Yeah. So with the tiny tools or the micro moves, the reason that I designed this menu in the way that I did was because I could not think of a big vision or a big goal. Like, you know what I'm like, big business, like big goal, unstoppable success. Like, when your head is in a place where you cannot literally think outside of that thought or that moment, there's no way you can think about a big goal. So the way that I managed to create these shifts was, what is the gateway, or what is the easiest access to feeling a tiny little bit better in this moment that I have right now? And sometimes it just felt so hard to go and do a workout, but I knew that I could go for a walk. Or it felt so hard to do a 20-minute meditation, but I know that I could do 3 minutes of breath work. So it's like, what is the thing that you could do right now that you feel like is a first step? Playing your favorite music. I had a friend reach out to me this morning, say that she doesn't feel good. And I said, right, like, here's a playlist. It's my ice bath playlist. Put it on right now. I'm going to put it on as well. And we're going to do, you know, like this shamanic shaking where you shake out your whole entire body. I said, let's do this for the first 2 songs. Then the next song, I love to play it really loud and I love to sing. And we kind of did it together. So that created a shift for us both, actually. And it was really, really fun. We had such a laugh doing it. If someone is really in it, then you need to refer them out. If someone is actually talking about making a plan or that they don't want to be here, then you call a crisis line, you activate. 988. There's a bunch of different ones, but that is international. You can also text as well. So I think that it can often be hard to have conversations. And in the book, I've shared some really, really simple conversation starters. And you and I use these, like, how are you? And it's like, oh, I'm great, I'm good. I'm like, well, you actually, we're both full of shit here because how good are you really? Like,
I self-corrected in my defense before we hit record. Nick was like, how are you? I'm like, I'm good. Actually, I'm like stressed. I'm not so great.
Yeah, and it's like that default, isn't it? And if we're all just running on autopilot, like Danielle said to me before, she's like, how the fuck are you really? And I'm like, oh. And then there's like nowhere to hide, and you've really got to think about a considered response. Another one that I love is, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 right now? And just being able to give it a number and say, well, I'm a 6. Like, okay, cool. Like, why do you feel like you're a 6? Tell me. So it's starting to get more specific and clear about the way that we communicate with each other, and just knowing that there's so much richness in that. Like, I feel closer with you because we've navigated some really gnarly stuff. Like, we've had so many amazing times, and I feel so much closer to you because of the tough stuff that we've gone through as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of emotional safety when somebody shows you they're not just around when it's hunky-dory. And it's interesting. There's such a big difference between, and this kind of plays into this, is a connection versus a relationship. I feel like I was in my 20s and I was dating, I would overvalue a connection. Like, if something was really deep with somebody, I felt so seen, I felt so understood, I'd be like, this is somebody significant in my life. But what I found as I've gotten older is it's my relationships that are really significant. It's not to downplay the value of a deep connection, but there have been so many deep connections that disappear, that don't show up, that don't write back, that just don't have the capacity for me in their life. And it's been heartbreaking. And so one of the changes for me when I really need support is not just looking at who I have a connection with, but who do I have a real relationship with? 2 people that have mutually invested in a way that shows me that I'm safe to turn to those people. And I'm not the most private person, and I've gotten to know a lot of close friends who are very private. And they've really taught me, like, not everybody is worthy, but not everybody has the right to hear your story and to hold you through hard times. I know that the suicide rate increased in 2022, and I guess that's the most recent statistics.
There's 2023 as well, it went up again. So they've just said, it's the worst that it's ever been. So whilst there's all this research, and whilst it's the most hopeful that it's ever been in terms of what we can do, it's also the worst that it's ever been. So now is the time for us to actually make a change.
You know, I have no research on this, but I do find, as somebody who has suffered from anxiety in my own ways, I've found that a lot of anxiety comes after an incident. Like, it's a delayed response, because it's like Darwinistic, right? It's like when you're in fight or flight and you're having to handle a situation, you don't have time for your anxiety. Your anxiety really can take you out. It's a full-time job, right? So you just handle a situation, and then the anxiety comes in like a wave, and it can come into your life for months and months and months after the fact, after you've already held something. And I think a mistake some people make is they think, man, I have so much anxiety, but nothing's wrong right now. It's like, well, maybe you just came out of a tidal wave of things, and now your body is able to relax and feel all the things you were feeling. And so it doesn't surprise me after something like the pandemic in 2020, where we were all forced to be at home and feel our feelings and not socialize and turn to all these things we used for connection, numbing at its worst, joy at its best, that we're seeing these numbers increase as people kind of settle into life after COVID, where it's like, maybe you were in fight or flight, having to care for kids, having to put food on the table or whatever it was during COVID, even just the fear of your loved ones getting harmed by an illness or dying, is enough, I think, to put the collective in this fight or flight. And then come 2022, 2023, we take this collective breath and this wave of stress can come in. So I've no idea what the tie is here, but I do know the highest the suicide rate ever was in 1940s. So I don't know if in 2023 it's gotten higher than that. But yeah, I know that there were world wars happening in 1941, World War II. What do you think? I don't know, like, what have I not asked you before we go that I should be asking you to help everybody with themselves or with the people around them to help these numbers go down and to help people feel better?
I think the biggest thing is knowing that we've got the power to make a change. For me, I loved COVID because it brought forward this conversation about mental health. It used to be like speaking into just like this vacuum where people didn't really get it. And I think that whilst it's been challenging, it's also very honest. And it's brought forward a lot more openness for us to have these conversations that are now mainstream, where we're talking about emotions and we're talking about mental fitness and mental wellness. And I really hold a vision for a world where, just like physical health, like I was a personal trainer for 10 years from 17 to 27. And when I started as a personal trainer, it was still a little bit abnormal to go to the gym every day. Now we know that that's really a non-negotiable. When you move your body, you move your mood. We know that it is vital for us to move as human beings. It's also vital for us to treat mental health in the same way too. It's like, just as you brush your teeth and you have your dental health, you've also got your mental health. So if we worked on our mental health twice a day, just like we brushed our teeth or went to the gym, what might the world look like? And what might the texture and quality and richness of our relationships and life's experience be when we put our mental health and ultimately put ourselves first?
This has been such a good conversation. I hope everybody checks out the book One More Day. If there's somebody you know that's really struggling, this is such a great gift for them. And if it's somebody that you know that is just like a high achiever, that maybe you've had that intuitive nudge to check in on them, but you don't know how, maybe just leaving this on their shelf. I'm a big fan of leaving books places for the right person.
You know that actually Louisa, who's the executive director of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, came into my house and your book is on my bookshelf. And she said, "Oh my God, Ashley Stahl, I love her."
Oh, that's
and I
so
said,
funny.
I said, "I love her as well." And I was like, "She's actually one of my best friends." She was like, "No way. I haven't told you that yet." Right?
It is.
I can't believe you just mentioned that.
Yeah, that is so funny. See, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember when I was so attached to my book doing well. Was it you that I was telling this to, Nick, that I saw a healer and she was like, okay, because I was like really attached. I'm like, this needs to be a New York Times bestselling book. Like, my ego got caught in it for 5 minutes. And then she was like, let's just go on a magic school bus and picture your book driving around the world, wherever it goes. And it's just falling into the hands of the people it's meant to be falling into. And so whenever people tell me what you just said, I picture like, oh, my book made its way into her hands. How cool. And it's like the magic of the world. So where can everybody find you, Nick, and learn from you even more?
So my website's nick.com. I love hanging out on Instagram most. I'm fond of a voice note on there. And then the book's at onemoredaybook.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on.
I love this. I could just hang with you all day.
I mean, we literally do.
Thanks for tuning in to the U-Turn podcast. I hope you learned so much in this episode and you're putting it into action today. We would love to hear from you. Slide into my DMs at Ashley Stahl or leave a written review if you're inspired. It would mean so much to us. Be sure to subscribe to the show because, as you know, the more subscribers we get, the better the guests we can bring you. And in the meantime, if you're looking to skyrocket your personal brand and impact millions, head on over to wisewhisperagency.com to learn more about how we are getting clients booked for the TEDx stage.